Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and you're listening to or watching the Human Potential at Work. I am the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and I'm really delighted to have my guest today, Garry Turner. Garry Turner created a program called Have Courage Summit, and I was really blessed to be one of the people that he featured, and he featured people from all over the world. And I found it very interesting, not only that he created the summit, but why he created it. And I really think you're going to like listening to Garry's voice and what he has to say, and his walk, which, like all of us, has not always been an easy walk. So, Garry, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Debra. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, yes. Garry, tell us a little bit about why you created the Have Courage Summit and a little bit more about the summit as well.
No, sure. Well, thanks for the introduction. I think, first of all, I have to say thank you, Debra, for the work you do, because I think why you were such a key person for me to reach out to for the summit was because of your book, Inclusion Branding.
Oh,
and it completely transformed my understanding of what it meant to be inclusive. To know now, as I didn't before, that 1 in 7 people have or will have a disability was completely new to me. And the reason for the summit, the reason me putting it on was because I myself was excluded at a young age. So although I don't have any disabilities per se, I do know what it feels like to be excluded at a young age. And I had this awakening, Debra. I had an awakening literally around 12, 18 months ago, where I was sitting there in a nice car, nice house, nice life, everything the outside world would tell you success looks like. But inside, I was hollow, absolutely hollow. And that really sent me on this crazy journey of, right, how can I try and understand what's going on there? And it ended up being the Have Courage Summit as one medium to try and help other people just find their spark and to make sure they're getting out of their own way as well.
Yeah, well said. And it's interesting, when you just made the point that you don't have a disability, and that we can all get left out and we can all be bullied. And with cyberbullying, we had a show about that a couple of weeks ago. But it's humans can be very cruel to each other, and like you said, you survived it even though it was years of it, and and it, and just went on about your life. And then at some point you realized that something was wrong, something was missing. I have to stop and I have to really explore what that means. And so one thing that I always talk about is, none of us should be excluded. None of us should be. And certainly we shouldn't be excluding people because they have a disability and assuming they don't add any value because you're gay, or because you worship the wrong God, or you don't worship God. It's ridiculous. We all add value. And I always say, and I'm sure people are sick of it, but the world really does work better when we can all be included. So I loved the Have Courage Summit. I was I thought it was a very powerful conversation that you and I had, and we'll make sure that we provide that link so that others can go and listen to it. And at the end of the program, we're also going to share the link so that so that you can go and listen to the entire series. But I just thought that your conversations about being vulnerable, especially as a man, because I think men aren't allowed to be vulnerable. So I thought it actually took some real courage for you to come out and really talk about vulnerability.
It's a funny topic, isn't it? Because, I was literally at an event yesterday that we put on called Natural HR, Debra, here in the UK. And what was really fascinating, it's the first time I've been in a room with 50 people that genuinely, we went behind the job title, we went behind, the disability, we went behind the frustrations that so many of us feel when we just want to be seen. I think every one of us, no matter what our background, if we have a disability, we don't, we're black, white, whatever, we just want to be seen and to feel like we have a voice. And I just really feel that vulnerability is a critical part for us as individuals, but also as leaders to, we've got to meet in the middle. That vulnerability, we need to give it, but I think we also need to receive it. And I think we're somewhere in a transition point, I feel, Debra, right now.
I agree. And I know Brene Brown, one of my favorite authors, she talks a lot about vulnerability, and And it actually took a lot of courage for her to talk about vulnerability. And when she did, even though, she was on Oprah and she was getting all this attention, she actually was attacked for it. I remember hearing her, I watched an interview she did one time with Oprah, and she was talking about it had post, it was having all the success. And then she started reading people's comments, and the comments were so mean. Oh, she should go on her diet. Her hips are so big. And it was so mean and personal. And Oprah said to her, never read the comments, never read the comments, because a lot of the comments are so mean spirited, and not all of them, but and so it's like, okay, so I'm having the courage to be vulnerable, and you're going to slap me down for it. It's like, wait, that's not going to help. And so here you are as a man talking about vulnerability. And I also think that's very interesting, because once again, men aren't allowed to cry. They're not allowed to show their feelings. They're not allowed to be vulnerable. And I, as a mother that has a son, I always tried to teach my son, you be who you need to be, and don't let society tell you what you can and cannot do. But I still think there's some courage that comes from you coming out as a man and talking about vulnerability.
Well, I appreciate the comment, Deborah. I just find it interesting. I've got to, like I say, back to 3 years ago, though, I would not have even thought about vulnerability as even a word. I would have seen it the same way as so many people do on this planet, which is as a weakness.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I'm learning very quickly, and I'll be very open with you in the moment, really open with you, Deborah. I thought about an hour ago emailing you to say, I'm not sure I should come on the podcast, because my fear kicked in. It's Debra Rue. She got all these followers. Who am I to be on a podcast with Debra? But it happens. It happens. And that's just me sharing again that literally as recent as an hour ago, I was starting to get the little fear in the back of my mind come up. Who are you? Are you good enough? All the rest of it. So it doesn't go away. It doesn't stop. But I think it's just about knowing yourself and loving yourself enough and loving those around you enough that you can just be more of you. And I think that's a lot of what vulnerability is about. It's quite hard in the society we have to be the true you. And I think that's the journey we're all on, I think, to some extent.
Oh, that is beautifully said. And you do know me. So it's like I do have followers and stuff, but I'm just as vulnerable. And I think the reason why we both have an audience is because people are really looking for that now. They want people that are going to be authentic. They're not going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to, be human. But I just really, really appreciated your work. So I'm glad that you knocked that voice down and said, no, this is something I need to do. And maybe my voice will help others, which I know it will. So tell us a little bit more about the Have Courage Summit, why you did it, who were some of the speakers and the topics. Let's just explore that a little bit more, because I thought it was really a beautiful series, and it is still available, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, so I think what's so fascinating is that if you look at the breadth of the speakers, Deborah, so we had people that were, so like yourself, from the the inclusion space. We had people like Peter Bregman and David Burkus from the leadership space. We had colleagues like Richard Gerver, who does a lot of work internationally around education. We had some independent people who are quite spiritual as well, like April Avett and Joe Nunziata. And so we just had this really diverse and, by design, to be honest, a real good mix of women, different backgrounds. And that was intentional. That was a very intentional part of that series. And I think what's come out of it, if I may share some of that, Deborah, is that some of the stories that have come out of that, and I'm sure your work's the same, is that you probably only hear maybe 1 in 10 or maybe 1 in 50 of the people that have actually been impacted by something that they've read on social media, or they've listened on your podcast, or they've read in your book. We don't normally hear the reality of our work. And I think when you get that odd story, it totally moves you. And I think I had around 10 direct stories, of which our conversation was one of those, where people have literally, one person left their job, Deborah, by the end of the series.
Wow, yay!
They were so upset. They were getting ill at work. They were getting ill. They were being bullied. They were being ostracized. And they left, by the end of the series, they'd left their job because they just said they'd rather be out of work than working in the workplace where they were literally dying in the workplace.
Yeah.
So, so there's a few nice stories like that came out of it as well. And I just think what it's given me the confidence, and the same as you do with this podcast, is that we are all of equal value. And back to the inclusion point, and I really mean that. Not take the monetary value out of the equation. Every single one of us, regardless of disability, background, creed, anything, we have got equal value. And I just firmly believe that. And that's a lot of the background to the Courage Summit. And I believe it's a lot of background to your work as well, Debra, is we really see the same.
I agree. And I want to point out something that Liz Gilbert, another one of my favorite authors, she wrote, Eat, Pray, Love. I would know. Yeah. Eat, Pray, Love, which was a phenomena. She was shocked by it. And she also wrote other books. I've read all of her books. I think she's a fabulous writer. And she said something one time that I just thought was so profound. She said a lot of profound things, but in her book, Big Magic, which I also love, she said that when you create something, you create a book, you create a podcast, you create the Have Courage Summit, you once you let it go and you put it out there in the airwaves or in the universe, it's not really yours anymore. And what people do with it and how they use it to grow or change, it's really nothing about you. And I just thought that was such an important point, because you don't know why you're creating something. It's maybe it's healing you, it's making you a better person, all those things, it's supporting the people, but sometimes it's sort of like that ripple, that drop in water that causes the ripple effect. So you got these 10 wonderful, powerful stories that came back to you and made you feel really good, but you don't know what ripples you've created from the summit and where it's going to continue to go. And I just thought that was such an interesting point that she made.
I think it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing the quote, actually, because I think you're right, though. I genuinely believe that, when I started the process, if I'm going to be really, really open with you and vulnerable again. So the process, I had a great coach. It was an excellent summit. The process of going about it, networking and meeting people was brilliant. But the model, if I'm honest with you, Debra, it's quite a network marketing model. Okay. Actually, when you build a summit, you build an email list, and you've got your tribe, and it's all fine. That's all good. But for me, very early on, it was never about that. It was actually about how do we help more people have more courage? And I very quickly became misaligned because my own value was around getting the right people like you for the summit over getting the people that can give me the number of email lists that I need to be able to meet the target of the coach. So I really quickly digressed from what I was signing up for and what I paid a lot of money to bring it to life with. So, but I really feel exactly what you described is that whatever's it's come through me, this summit, and I'm going to sound quite spiritual now, and I am more so the last 12 months. That summit came through me. It was not me that created that, but something came through me to make that come to life. And it's going to sound a bit woo-woo for some people, but I really believe that, Debra. I really believe that.
And I totally agree with you. And I also feel that way. There's been times I try to do it. Sometimes I forget, but I remember one time I was going to speak at the United Nations at the invitation of the President of the United Nations at the time. And I was going to speak before the COSP, which is the Congress of State Parties or Conference of State Parties, I think. And I was so intimidated. I'm sitting on the stage and I'm thinking, oh my God, you're such a poser. What are you doing here? Don't mess this up. And I was really intimidated. And I could see visitors walking in the UN and they could look in that gorgeous, amazing UN. And I'm sitting at the front and I'm thinking, what are you doing here? You don't. But I thought, stop. And I really meditated and I prayed and I said, please speak for me. Please help me know what to say. And the other speakers were quoting chapter and verse from the CRPD, which I can't do it. I can do some of it, but I thought, stop. So I just let what I would call the universe, the intelligent universe, flow through me, and it was beautiful. And the crowd responded, and I think if we do that more, and whatever you believe, it doesn't have to be God or spiritual, but just let it flow through you, whatever it is. I don't even know how to define it, but I totally agree with you. And beautiful, beautiful things happen. Beautiful things happen when you don't worry about who's going to get the credit, who's going to listen, am I going to make money, all those things that then just start weighing me down and terrifying me. But you just let it flow. It's really beautiful what happens.
That's lovely. Do you think, just a question if you don't mind, Deborah, for you, do you feel that at times we exclude ourselves due to this thinking
Boy,
and this?
it's such a good point. I've never thought about it, but you're so right. You're so right. And sometimes I get so anxious about the work, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's a really, really, you should write about that, Gary. That's a very good point. We probably do. And we're bullies to ourselves. Oh, you're not good enough. Who are you? You didn't get a college degree. You're nobody. Yeah, sometimes maybe often we're absolutely our own worst critic. So that's a really good point. Um, I want to ask you a question. So you talked about being bullied and
Mhm.
the impact it had on your life, but and even being invisible and not truly being seen. Do you mind exploring that a little bit and how that led to the series and the man that you've become too?
No, sure. No problem at all. I think so. This was really a pivotal moment for me, and I hope this can be hopefully some small light for people if they're stuck in their own head or they're afraid of something right now. Is so I never really. I'd say a lot of people hold on to that anguish, that worry, that fear throughout their lives. And I got to be honest, I didn't really do that, Deborah. But what I did do is if I take you through a short journey of that background. So I was psychologically and physically bullied age 12, 13 when I moved to Wales, which is the country on the west side of the United Kingdom. And it was really interesting because this make you laugh actually, Deborah. So it's called Pembrokeshire. Pembrokeshire is the county in Wales, and they call it Little England beyond Wales because there was nobody that spoke Welsh in that country. It was just full of English people. So the irony was, I was not bullied by a Welsh national. I was bullied by another English person at age
Wow.
12 who wanted to guard their patch. So long story short, it was physical bullying, it was psychological bullying, lasted 3 years. And yeah, it's horrible. And then I went to university and I got into substances. Used to self harm at university. I had a mental health challenge 3 years ago. Now I say those things not because any of them define me as the man Gary that I am, but in retrospect, I had coaching last February. So it's as recent as this. It really is February 2018. And what my coach helped me see, she just held the mirror up. So it wasn't a case that she told me anything. She just said, okay, talk. And what I realized, Deborah, it was emotional suppression. So it wasn't that I was hurting an awful lot inside, but I wasn't voicing. And I think back to the point about being socialized, particularly as a white male again, is that we just
Right.
don't know. I've been brought up on you don't talk about this stuff, stiff upper lip as a British man. And so it wasn't that I couldn't talk about it. I just didn't have the vocabulary or the emotion to do that.
Oh, that's very powerful. That's very powerful. I know my producer Doug Foresta does a show called Mind Talk, and he's having a lot of these topics on there because and in the United States, mental health issues are, and I know in other countries as well, but it is part of the disability conversation. And I was talking to a wonderful brand the other day, and they were saying, and they're a very creative, gigantic creative brand, and they're finding that people are um, so they're so stressed and anxious and fearful and feeling invisible and not valued, and that it's impacting productivity and creativity and innovation. And they're like, what we want to do is we want to put a program on place to deal with mental health and mental illness. And so I said, oh, so you want to put on something for human beings, because part of being alive are these contrasts. I mean, I'm walking some really scary things in my life right now and have been for a while, which is why I went with purple hair, because it's like, gosh darn it, I'm going to just enjoy this journey. But it's hard for people feeling like they're not seen, they're invisible, whether they're not seen at work. And I've been bullied at work. It was I worked at this corporation years ago, and it was a very dysfunctional team, and it was all women, and the women actually were turning on each other. And I remember when my daughter was born with Down syndrome, and I was working for a woman. This woman, she had the opportunity to have a nanny for her children. Well, I had to work full time and provide caregiving, and she was very cruel to me. And I learned later that she actually had a substance problem. She had a problem with cocaine, and cocaine will just it's very bad for your body. So it was good to understand later some of why it happened, but at the time it was painful, and I dreaded work. I hated work. I didn't want to go, and Saturday evening I would start getting all stressed out about I'm going to have to go back to work on Monday. Are you sure I can't quit? I would say to my husband. He's like, we got like bills to pay. We have a baby to support, but I think there's so many people out there just desperately dying inside and feeling invisible and not valued. And I don't bring anything to the table. And I think that's why your work is just really important. And I know you've had some of those same feelings.
Yeah, totally, and I think it's really important for for your audience as well around, let's say, this inclusion discussion. It's so important that we're looking at. So yesterday at this event, Natural HR, what's wonderful is one of the questions from the audience, Deborah, was actually, are we really considering the needs of neurodiverse people as much as we're talking about it? So we're talking about it a lot, but how are we actually designing our organizations and our systems and our leadership to truly include people with neurodiversity? That question would not even come up 3 years ago. So there is some good stuff, there is an awareness, there is a consciousness shift, I really believe, coming. It needs to come quickly, but
Yes.
I do believe it's shifting. So whilst, yes, there's a lot of people suffering, I'm really hoping this conversation, if it reaches one human being who goes, damn it, I'm going to step into my courage tomorrow and have that conversation I need to have, then it would have been a success, I think.
I agree. I agree. And I would highly recommend for everybody to listen to the Have Courage Summit. The interviews are very powerful. You see why I had Garry on the show. He has a very beautiful, powerful voice, even though he doesn't even know it himself. And I think there's a beauty in that as well, Garry, because sometimes people appear to be so successful and so polished and so put together, and you think, why am I so stupid? Why can't I, and it just gives us more reasons to attack ourselves. I remember when my company Tech Access, my previous company, started failing because of the financial crisis, which wasn't my fault. And it wasn't my fault that the bank I was with failed. But if I'd been a better CEO and a better manager and blah blah blah, then I could have prevented this. And I remember talking about it in an interview, a television, I think it was a newspaper interview. And one of my friends came to me and said, okay, stop it. Stop telling people that you failed, Deborah. Stop. And I said, no, I'm not going to stop. And he's like, no, you would be a better CEO if you would stop telling people that, you have made these really big mistakes. And I said, yeah, but that's what all the other people are doing, telling me what great leaders they are. And it just makes me feel like more of a failure because I am not perfect, but I keep trying and I keep trying to be more human and to help others. And one more comment I'll say, I've talked about this on air, but it was trending on Twitter one day, white privilege. And I thought, do you have the courage to go out there and join that, I'm sure, very hostile tag? But I did. And I said, what am I doing with my white privilege? I'm opening the doors for others to come in. Come on in. So I'm opening the door wide, and I'm acknowledging that I had privilege, but I also have privilege because I was born in a developed country like the United States or the United Kingdom. And I also have privilege because I had, parents that cared about me. You know what I mean? We all have privilege, but we also have been held back. And we're all trying to figure out, what does it mean to be truly human? So what do you think that people need to be doing to be seen and to make sure they allow themselves to be seen?
Wow, what a beautiful double barrel question. I think it's beautiful. I'm going to start just very quickly. I just want to put a shout out to your friend again, Brene Brown, because she did a Facebook Live, I think it was November last year, where she challenged white supremacy, and she said she had death threats because of it. She had like people coming after for it, but she said she had to step in her power. So I'm using that as a segue, because part of the reason for the Have Courage Summit was also my awakening that I have some great people of color, some people with neurodiverse challenges in my network now that I never had a year ago because I look for them. So my first answer to your question would be, seek out people that don't look like you. Intentionally go out of your way. Not, it could be a different socioeconomic background, it could be a different level of education, it could be their different color to you, a different background, but intentionally step into that, have that vulnerability, that courage to meet people that don't look like you and just talk to them. Just have a conversation and say, what's it like for you to live on this planet? And I found that to be such a beautifully, not only fantastic learning experience, but from an empathy point of view and from a growth point of view, I've learned far more over the last 12 months from people that don't look like me than people that do look like me, Deborah. And that's a real life experience. It's huge.
And that is beautiful. And I do want Brene Brown to be my friend, but I'm a fan. So. I'm sure there's a lot of people, but I so admire her for stepping out there and having the courage. And it's scary getting death threats. I'm blessed that I haven't gotten death threats, but I have gotten threats. I remember somebody, I didn't even know who this person was, sent me emails, very threatening emails years ago with my old company Tech Access, saying that I wasn't really hiring people with disabilities. I was just taking all the money. And I first of all, it just cracked me up because nobody wants to know how much money I've invested of my own money or lost helping this community. But I believe that money is best when it's circulated. So I'm not even crying over my, cereal. I just think it's important to give back. And I believe that, as Lynn Twist, I believe, says that the soul of money is better when it's circulated and it's passing through our societies and it's helping people. Just hoarding it and keeping it in your bank because I'm going to protect my family, I think has gotten us also in this mess. So but I still, you just have to keep being authentic, and you have to conquer your own demons as we walk this path too. But I want to ask you one more question. What does inclusion mean to you, and how do you ensure that we are really creating good role modeling for inclusivity?
Yeah, so I think inclusion, we've touched on being seen. I think that's a really critical part for me. Is I love this. I'm going to completely bastardize the comment now, but there's something about you'll know better than me around being invited to dance, but actually dancing. I can't remember what it is now. Can you remember what that is?
I don't remember either.
There's something about being invited to dance, but actually having the dance or something along those lines. But it's actually about we can have these conversations all day long. That inclusion is important. We've got the statistics. You look at KPMG, look at Capgemini, look at Boston Consulting Group. We know that inclusion adds value to businesses, yet we're still not doing it. So
right.
I just find this really bizarre paradox right now in the world of work. And I just feel inclusion has to be role modeled. It has to be role modeled from the top, but we also have to role model it ourselves. Back to the point about leaning into our courage and really meeting people that don't look like us, because if we continue to believe that we are independent, isolated human beings on this planet, we will unfortunately continue the current path that we have, and it will be more difficult to include people with neurodiversity or those with disabilities or those that have difficulty for access, as long as we're not allowing every individual to be seen. And I think that's the big shift for me, is sort of being confident to let ourselves be seen, but also creating the organizational structures and the cultures that allow those people to be seen. So it's really a double-edged sword, I think.
And that's really beautifully said. And it's interesting. We're making so much progress with inclusion, disability inclusion, diversity inclusion, finding our voices. But I also think that there is, I get, go with the low hanging fruit first. But one thing that worries me about the disability inclusion movement right now is that we are making sure that neurodiverse people, like people with ADHD, which is one of my fun challenges, people with mental health, people issues like depression, dyslexia, things like that. Very, very important to make sure these people are included in all of society, in the workforce, and also that we are accommodating them, providing adaptions, understanding how their brains work so they can bring their best self to work. All of that is so important. But at the same time, I fear, and I've seen that people with very severe disabilities, like some of my team members, they're being left out because it's too hard. We don't understand. I'm afraid of how to do it, and all these different reasons. So it's like we started creating this so everybody would be included. But I see large numbers of people with severe disabilities in developed and developing countries being left out of the conversations, and I find that's very troubling. And I so once again, let's not just decide that that the door don't work for everybody, that everybody can't come in, that only certain people can come in, and now we're done. But at the same time, so many people, as you noted earlier, so many people are part of this community. In the United States, one in four Americans identify as having a disability, according to the CDC. In the UK, one in five, and in Canada, one in five. Now, the World Health Organization is estimating one in seven, because many countries don't do census, so they don't know. And also, many people with disabilities, they won't self-identify, because if they're self-identified, one more reason for me to be excluded.
Do you mind me asking you, Deborah? I'm really interested with you having some people that have severe disabilities on your team. What were some of the sort of, for other organisations listening, including my own, what are one or two steps they could take today to start on that journey towards making it an easier, or making it safe for people with more severe disabilities to work in the workplace?
Well, I think it goes to conversations like this. We have to make sure that we are looking at our unconscious biases. And I loved what you said, and totally agree with what you said, that hiring people that don't look like me. I mean, hire people that do look like you, that are qualified, but don't always hire. I'll use something that Rob Newhouser from Siemens recently said in one of the broadcasts we did. Don't keep hiring mini-me's. Don't always go by your gut. Oh, my gut says this person's perfect. And maybe your gut's saying that because they went to the same school as you. They look like you. You understand they're the same culture. Don't hire people that are exactly like you. Take the time to understand, somebody like Lamondre, who works for us, who is so talented. But at the same time, and that's, by the way, I'm going to end that. I'm not going to say, but he is so talented. He also happens to be a gentleman, an African American, that is in a wheelchair, and he cannot use his arms and legs in the same way that we can. One thing I always loved when I'm with Lamondre and somebody meets him, typically when you meet somebody for the first time, you're going to hold out your hand to shake their hand. It's very common. For example, if you're in the United States or in the United Kingdom, in some countries, there are other ways of greeting. But what he does to immediately make people feel comfortable, because they realize he can't shake their hand. And so he'll say, give me a little fist bump. And, I'm a typical white person. Oh, let me do this right. I usually miss it totally, but it relaxes everybody. I remember there's this one gentleman, his name is Kevin, brilliant guy, and he was born with no arms. And I was like, I met Kevin and I said, Kevin, help me. I want to greet you, but tell me how to do it. And I was confident enough to ask him, and he said, Deborah, shake my shoulder. I said, okay. So sometimes people that do have severe disabilities have to be teachers to us. Sorry, I'm going to throw my Apple Watch out the room, as it makes all these noises, and I can't figure out how to stop it. But we have to be teachers to each other. We have to we have to help people understand how to accommodate us. And then what do corporations need to do? What do employers need to do? They need to listen, and they need to be willing to ask questions in a way that, doesn't tear people down, break their spirit, but actually is help me understand so I can honor you, like this gentleman Kevin did, and like Lamondre does. So I think we have to be teachers to each other. Another of our employees, Rosemary Musacchio, who is our Chief Accessibility Officer and brilliant, she was born with cerebral palsy, and she told me that when she lies down flat, she can only blink her eyes. And so often when she's out and about traveling and doing her work, people won't speak to her. They'll speak to whoever's with her, her companion. And she finds that very insulting, because she is there. She's just going to communicate with you differently. So I think what employers have to really take the time to do is understand that just because a person is maybe very different from you because they have severe disabilities doesn't mean they can't add value, doesn't mean you shouldn't take the time to accommodate them or provide adaptations for them. So I think it's got to be on both sides. Don't you agree, Garry?
You know something, I think it's such a powerful comment. And I think what comes up for me when you're describing that as well is, I'm very mindful of this, and and I know your audience will be, but I hope my audience will be, is that, we're 1 second away from being in a situation where we might need this support. What if I get run over tomorrow? Or what if, my body changes and suddenly I've got cerebral palsy tomorrow? We just don't know. So I think we have a lot more empathy and a lot more connectivity and, just humility, really, to know that we are all of equal value. We are all
And empathy, right? Love the word empathy. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's the big thing. This is a new journey for me, as we're talking about today. I'm far from the polished article, and I'm still learning, particularly about the disability inclusion agenda. But your book was just so helpful for me that I can now, at least in my own small way, I can facilitate a conversation. At least I now know. Let's get that conversation out into a safe space and have the dialogue, which I would not have had the language or the confidence to do a year ago.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that because, of course, that little, thing in my head says it wasn't good enough. It's not good. And I try to just go away because you just do your best and you put it out there and you don't know, what people are going to do with it. You just have to really, uh, you have to put yourself out there. But sometimes when you put yourself out there, society will just slap you down. So you have to keep putting yourself out there and you have to keep finding ways. The other day I was complaining to Doug. He, a poor thing, has to listen to me complain all the time. And I was saying, um, it's ridiculous. Why do people not want to pay for social good and social impact? And I was just whining a bit because a lot of the work that I do, it's free and corporations are always coming and asking me for free advice. And I always help because I really care about this community. And then I thought, oh, that is a really bad attitude. And I said to Doug, I've got to stop saying that because that is not true. There are a lot of people that really do want to pay for social impact work and social good work. And the world is changing. I do believe it's changing. And so instead of just assuming always it's the same and it's always the way, we are making progress and we need to focus on finding, using a word you used earlier, the tribes, the people that do want the world to change for all of us and don't want the Lamondres and the Rosemarys to be left out because they were born differently than us. And you also mentioned, you could get in a car accident at any time. Well, when my husband was diagnosed with early onset dementia, I mean, really, that just scared me to death. And my husband had a traumatic brain injury when he was 11 years old. And just the reality is his brain is going to age differently than somebody without a traumatic brain injury. And so we're learning a lot about our beautiful brains. But, we're all on this journey and there's an expiration date for all of us. What are you doing with what you've been given to make the world a better place? I feel so passionate about that. And I know you do as well.
Oh, you really do. You've got my whole body buzzing just at that very statement. Because if we boil everything down, and again, it can sound a bit spiritual, and it is. And again, I'm not a religious, but I am agnostic. But from an energy point of view, I call it source. Yes. I call it energy. When you wake up to that and you realize, your thinking just drops. And I think the more people can wake up to the fact they are good enough, they are. They don't need to have a big house and a big car. They don't need to be seen to be socially accepted. Acceptable. I mean, we need to think. I think first of all, we need to find our own measure of what happiness looks like for us inside, and then from there we can build what we want to show the world outside. But until we do the inner work, and I've only done that the last 18 months, that's the big shift. And I think the more of us that can do that, the social impact will just absolutely go crazy exponentially. But until people do that inner work, and it's hard because it's scary. That's why we don't want to be vulnerable, yeah? When we've got a story or we've got some stuff that's difficult, it's scary.
Yeah, you're going to get judged and you're going to get penalized and you're going to get bullied and you're going to get excluded and all of those things might happen, but that can't stop you. That can't stop you. And so, Garry, I love your voice. I think you are such a powerful leader, and I think you've only begun the journey. But I want to make sure that our guests know how to find you. So I know you're like me, you're active on social media, but can you tell us how to, and I'll also provide links, but how can people find out about the Have Courage Summit? How can they find you on social media? And can we expect more of the Have Courage Summit, more series, because it's really powerful. So I hope, yes, we can.
Well, it's very kind of you, Deborah. Thank you so much for that. So the URL, so if we go to havecourageoneword.co.uk, for anybody that signs up there, they'll get 7, well, I'm looking actually to expand it. So it'll probably be 8 or 9 free interviews of the 23 that took place. So they sign up at havecourageoneword.co.uk. They'll get a number of the interviews, one per day, for the first week or so. You can also find me on Twitter, as you say. I'm certainly following you avidly there. So at Garry Turner 0, and that's GARRYTURNER and the number 0. And I think they're probably the 2 main mediums. And I just want to add before we go as well, so important for me, Deborah, I've started repurposing my podcast, Value Through Vulnerability. And what I've been doing with that, because of the learning from you and the work you do, I've started recording videos with subtitles to make sure that the main takeaways, the content actually can reach more people that maybe have different accessibility needs. And I would never, ever have thought of that had I not come across your work. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And it's so easy to add captions now. You got, it was it, and another thing to remember, because a lot of it, you can do for free. You can use services like we use, rev.com. We use live captioning and stuff, which gets expensive, but we need it to be accessible for everyone. But it's also, darn it, I totally lost the train of thought. The other point out. Oh, I remembered again. Facebook had said that they found that between 80 and 85% of the videos that are posted on Facebook are viewed with the sound turned off. So if you're not captioning your videos, people are not getting your message. So it's wonderful that not only is it good for all of us, but it also is good for you to do this. So thank you for doing that, Garry, and thank you for your work. And I'm going to continue to watch it, and maybe you'll come back on again and continue to talk about your journey. But I believe your journey is very important, and I thank you for your work.
Well, and likewise, Deborah, you've been an absolute joy, and thank you very much for being in my life. I really mean it. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I feel the same way. Bye, everyone.
Take care.